So I actually started out life as a corporate lawyer, believe it or not. It's a huge career shift to something that focuses more on social justice, actually. So I began a career at Eversheds, which is a big law firm. I then went on to do my master's in human rights law, and then I came to Warwick to complete a PhD, which focused on family dispute resolution. So right from the beginning, I did know that I wanted to be doing something that made a difference and had an impact on the public. And so that was what prompted me to take the career change. And it happened very early on because I think I recognised that corporate law wasn't where I wanted to be. And when I began my master's in human rights law, because we were covering such a huge range of subjects, including refugee law to humanitarian law, it was a whole host of things that have huge impacts on people, and usually in circumstances where they don't really have a choice about what's going on. So that did inspire me to think more about where my career could take me and really potentially what impact it could have. So I focused on something, family law, which is, you'd say, probably a little bit more focused, a bit more domestic in a sense, but it is that one thing that has an impact on everybody. So when I start lecturing, it always is, right, this is the one module that is always going to be relevant in your life, no matter where you go. People will ask you questions about it, whether it's family, whether it's friends. This is the module that you're going to keep coming back to, and I think that is always true. So that's the direction in which I chose to go when I have a look back. So I was at Warwick when I did my PhD, so I started in 2008 or 2009. I can never remember what the beginning of that journey was. And I remember though graduating in 2013 and having a baby at my graduation. So my daughter, she was 1 at the time, but when I submitted, she was 6 months old. And so that is where I started the journey, but I have this long history at Warwick. So my PhD, I continued teaching, I did a postdoc, a couple of years here, and then I left Warwick for my first full-time academic role. I then came back in 2021. So since 2021, assistant professor and now associate professor, focusing on family law. It did feel like coming back home because everything was familiar. It was the middle of COVID by the time I arrived, and everything was different. People weren't around, but I think it was easy to settle back in because there was that familiarity. But it does feel like being back home, not just in the physical sense, but also in the way in which we approach law here. So my approach to research was always influenced obviously by law in context, because this is where I did my PhD, but that is something I fundamentally believe in. I think when it comes to family law, there's a real limit on the pure theory that you can and perhaps should do. So for me, family law impacts on everybody, and therefore we cannot decouple it from the context. And the work that I do focuses on that context. So the research I do is about bringing the reality of family law and family life to policymakers, so that when it comes to law reform, they are considering the things that actually have an impact. The idea that we have one law and it impacts on everybody in the same way is clearly wrong. I think the majority of people understand that, but until we get under sort of the flesh of it, we really have to look at how do these rules impact on individuals. Are they able to access, for example, family law, family justice? If not, why not? And quite often it's that lack of access that is a huge issue. So my research has spanned a range of different areas in family law, but looking fundamentally at how does this impact on individuals and can they access it? So when it comes to the legal system, it is really important that discussions around law reform take on board the evidences. So the research that I do is intended to inform the law using evidence of practice. So how does the law impact on an individual or on a family? Perhaps it is a minoritized family or a minoritized individual. Perhaps if somebody has a particular type of vulnerability. The law will tend to ignore those people because they don't have a loud enough voice. So the idea of the kind of research that I do is to be able to bring all of those things together, so the range of different experiences, voices, views, and take them to policymakers so that then they can't be ignored anymore. Decisions can be made around amending, reforming, changing processes or laws so that it captures far more people than it historically has. So I think we are living in a society where things are changing rapidly. We talk about diversity. I think 10 years ago that meant something entirely different to what it means now. So when I talk about diverse families, I'm talking about diverse socioeconomic profiles. I'm talking about diversity in terms of the family makeup. So do you have one parent, two parent, are they same sex, are they opposite sex? What is the makeup of the family? So you're looking at a society that's changing really rapidly. And as I said at the beginning, family law impacts on everybody. So we have to keep pace with that change, and we have to ensure that the law is taking those things on board. So I'm really fortunate because I'm able to do this research. I've got a couple of grants which have enabled me to look at law, the actual experience of family justice by individuals and families, and that means I can feed into those discussions. So it's a really good place to be. So obviously family law, but I'd like to talk about two different projects if that's okay. So I've done a fairly big project that looks at marriage recognition. Now, a lot of people don't really understand that that's a thing, but actually if your marriage is not legally recognised, it has significant consequences in terms of access to family law and family justice. And so my project was looking at the way in which a multitude of different people from a range of different communities get married, and whether or not the law recognises those marriages. So within the study, it's a collaborative study. I worked with colleagues from other universities, and we looked at the way in which, well, the meaning behind the wedding ceremonies and the extent to which the law accommodates those. In a nutshell, we found that the law doesn't really accommodate the vast majority of ceremonies that are non-Christian ceremonies. And it means that it makes it a little bit more difficult for those couples to then enter into a legally binding marriage. And that all fed into the Law Commission's review of weddings law. And in the end, it culminated in a lot of our research findings translating into policy recommendations. So that's great in terms of where you want your research to go. But it was such an important project because when you think about families, you tend to think about the states protecting that unit because it's so fundamental to society and stability. But then to find out that you have this whole host of people who are called cohabitants either because they have cohabited and they haven't legally married, or they think they're married, but the law says, actually, you did something. We don't really know what that was though. So you have this huge group of people, it's about 3.4 million people. So it's not tiny, it's not a small negligible minority, it's a lot of people that are not captured by the law. So essentially we wanted to talk about how it could be made easier for the law to accommodate them. So that was a project that's done. A new project that's coming up is looking at the child arrangements made by separated families. So this is an area of law, it's hugely significant against families. Our existing knowledge is that separation does tend to impact on children, but we don't really know what the majority of families do. So how do they come to arrangements? We know that the law says certain things are priorities, but to what extent are they actually made priorities within families that separate? So the project is really exciting. We have support from the MOJ, various other key stakeholders supporting the project. We're hoping by the end of it, so 2028, we have all of this knowledge about what's happening with the child arrangements for all of these children in these hundreds of thousands of families. So that's what's coming up next. So I'm a critical legal scholar, and in the teaching space, I do expect students to really critically engage. So I encourage a reflexive learning approach. And what that essentially means is when students are in the teaching space, they're constantly reflecting on what does this mean for me? What is my experience? Who do I know that may have experienced this? So that they can have a depth to their learning that goes far beyond just what's the theory of the law that we're learning right now. And it's really important that they do that because in the teaching, I want to try and disrupt these ideas of we have one law, it applies to everybody, it's homogenous, everybody experiences it in the same way. Those things are not true. And in the teacher space, it's so rewarding when students feel they can use their voice. So, and family law, child law lends itself to that. So, we'll have discussions about little brothers that are out of control, or, divorces that have happened, or child arrangements. And it's amazing because in that space where students feel they can trust the environment, obviously we set the ground rules when we start, it's a space in which they can bring their experiences. I think that's really important in this idea of being a critical legal scholar, understanding that this law impacts on various people in a whole host of different ways. So I think that makes the teaching experience far, far more rewarding, and the students are taking away a depth of knowledge that would otherwise not be there. So I do have sort of pedagogic approaches. Bell Hooks, I think all of her work on intersectionality, bringing that into the classroom environment is really important, because there's going to be a range of character traits that impact on, for example, as I mentioned, marriage law. The way in which somebody chooses to marry will depend on socioeconomic profile, will depend on religious belief, probably depend on gender as well. And so to understand that the decision making is a result of life experience or character traits is important, so that we are actually producing lawyers who understand law in the real world and not just the theory of what it's all supposed to be about. So I do take that approach very seriously. At the beginning of the modules, usually I will tell students this is what we're doing in this space. And it's great. They do tend to engage with that at Warwick. So, yeah. So I have a book, an edited book coming out in January 2026, and it's called Diverse Voices in Family Law. To me, that's sort of a culmination of bringing together my approach to teaching, my approach to research, and this idea of law in context. So it's an edited teaching book on family law, and it covers all of the main topic areas, so marriage, children, dispute resolution, domestic abuse, all of those key themes. But it's looking at it from a very critical lens and using a diversity of different voices. So in bringing that volume together, it's been important to be able to collect sort of academics that are working on a whole host of different issues from a range of perspectives. And what I'm hoping that book will do is help to diversify the curriculum beyond Warwick. So it's a teaching textbook. It's produced by Bristol University Press, and it will be available for law schools to adopt if they wish. I think what is really key in the volume is that it challenges ideas of, for example, the most basic thing, mediation is available to everybody. We've got a chapter that dissects what mediation looks like for a diverse family, and a diverse family can mean a whole host of different things. So the book is trying to look beyond the law just on paper, and trying to look at how experiences shape the way in which the law is experienced. I think a particularly interesting part of it is where we look at domestic abuse. So from forced marriage to male victims, there's a range of voices there that just don't make their way into the family law curriculum. And so it's been made a lot easier for academic colleagues across the country to be able to bring that in, because they're all contained within this one volume. So I do view diverse voices in family law as a really important direction to take the family law and child law curriculum, and I hope that it will be adopted. So for the law school, I am Director of Research Funding, and I think it's really important that we have that role within the law school. What it does for students is it ensures that the academic staff are involved in cutting edge research. So when we talk about a range of different legal topics, we're not just talking about those in abstract, we're talking about ways in which we've engaged with them, whether it's empirically or doctrinally. We're able to take them beyond what's on the paper, on the pages, of the textbooks. So I've spoken about my research, but actually we have a whole range of colleagues here who are the leaders in their field in the research that they do. So I see my role as Director of Research Funding as quite important to ensure that we keep applying for grants, getting the funding to be able to do this research. Mailing lists, that's it. Just get on all of them. And LinkedIn. So we do encourage students to come on to LinkedIn. It seems to be that one space which is really social media, but we don't mind being connected with students on because it's very professional. And so I would just say, find out what the relevant mailing lists are that are important to your interests, and ensure you're on there. It then just means it all appears in your inbox without you having to go off and do the research. But if you know who the leaders are in the fields that you're interested in and you connect with them on LinkedIn, it means that it's very easy then to keep on top of what they're doing.